Hello there. This video will walk you through all of the things that you need to do in Microsoft Excel to complete your first Excel assignment. So even if you've never ever used Microsoft Excel in your whole life and you're a little bit freaked out about the prospect of using it for this assignment, please don't be afraid because this video will give you detailed instructions on everything that you need to do in the program to answer the questions. Now, there are some questions in this assignment that I'm not going to cover, and that's because they're purely conceptual and they're based on the work that I'm going to show you how to do in Excel. So make sure that you show all of your work in Excel and that you put your answers into the Word document that you see on the screen now, and then submit both for your assignment. All right, so let's take a look. So in this example, Dr. Shinta wants to see if a time management workshop is going to improve academic achievement among non-traditional students who either work or have children or both work and have children while attending college at NSC. So the way that Dr. Shinta has operationalized academic achievement, or in other words, the way that Dr. Shinta is measuring academic achievement, is to look at GPA. So he wants to look at the GPA of students before and after they took the time management workshop in hopes that the overall GPA improves after the time management workshop. So he randomly selected 50 NSC students who work and or have children, and out of those 50 students, 30 agreed to participate in the time management workshop. So we started off with a random sample, ended up with a convenient sample because they had to agree to attend. So these students have their GPA reported before the time management workshop at the end of the fall semester. And then the time management workshop happens during winter break, and then they look at the GPA spring semester after the time management workshop. So just methodologically speaking, I already mentioned one of the limitations is that we do have a convenient sample even though we started off with a random sample. But another problem with this is that you don't really know if the level of difficulty in the classes in fall and spring was equivalent, right? Maybe in the fall they took more difficult classes. In the spring they took slightly easier classes, so their spring GPA is higher, not because of the time management workshop improving their ability to get everything done and do well in classes, but because they were taking easier classes. So I want you to start thinking about how every experiment has some flaw to it. It's never perfect, but when you start to do replication with studies, then you can start to be confident in the findings. No single study tells you all the answers. Okay, enough about methodology. Let's go ahead and use Excel to answer some of these questions. So the first thing that you'll see is I'm asking you to create an APA-style frequency distribution table in Excel. Now, when we've been doing these manually, I have you list your values from high to low, top to bottom. But for this particular assignment, I want you to list your list your values from low to high, top to bottom. And that's because we're going to end up creating a histogram in Excel, and I want that histogram to be accurate with your values from low to high, left to right on the x-axis. And in order for that to happen, that's how you have to create your frequency distribution table, low to high, top to bottom. All right, and I will show you how to format your table so that it is APA style as well. So let's go ahead and put our data into Microsoft Excel. So I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. So go up to the top left corner of the table where your data is. Wait for the little four-cornered arrow to appear, or four-arrowed plus sign thing. Left click. Now at this point you can right click and select copy, but I like shortcuts, so I'm going to hit Control and C on my keyboard. Control C at the same time, and that copies your data. Then go into an Excel document, go to the top left cell, and then hold down Control and hit the V key to paste. So Control V is the keyboard shortcut to paste. And you'll see your data is right there. And you can just double check that you got everything. So it ends in 2.2 and 3. Let's make sure. Hey, there it is. Awesome. Okay, so we've got our data. Now, the first problem in the assignment asks you to create a frequency distribution table for spring GPA. So just for spring GPA. And if you look at this data, we have the GPAs for all 30 participants in fall before they took the time management workshop, and then the same participants' GPAs in spring after they took the time management workshop. So this first person had a GPA of 3.5 in the fall and then a GPA of 3.7 in the spring. And you can see that we have 30 people. There's 31 rows because the first row is taken up with our labels. So make sure when you create your frequency distribution table that you use the spring GPA. So I'm going to go ahead and just copy, so hit the cell, Control C, and then Control V right here, and then also write number of students. Now you can see that this isn't all fitting in one cell, it's kind of overlapping. So to adjust that, you can double click, so go to the right in between E and F, double click, and it'll auto size it. And I'm also not happy that these aren't formatted the same way, so I'm going to highlight these. I'm going to select Times New Roman 12, and then make sure you're still in the Home tab. Click on this little guy here, so you can click the arrow, make sure it says bottom border, and then also do a top border. And I'm going to go ahead here and I'm going to wrap my text, and then I can shrink it a little bit. And there we go, number of students and spring GPA. Okay, now it looks good. I also like to center things, so I'm going to highlight both of these columns, just left click and drag, and then select this little center tab. So I'm just showing you how to format your table so that it's an APA style. Okay, so the first thing we need to figure out is the minimum value in our data set and the maximum, or the highest and the lowest. So I'm going to go down here, I'm going to type equals MIN for minimum and double click. Then I'm going to go to the first value in my data set and click it, and then I'm going to hold down the shift key and click on the last value in my data set, and that highlights everything in between, and then I'm going to hit enter. So my minimum value is 2.5. I'm going to go ahead and label that min. All right. And then my maximum value, or the highest value, to find that, equals MAX, double click max, then go up, click the first score of interest, and then the last score, hold down shift, left click, hit enter. So we know that without looking through it and trying to figure it out, the lowest GPA in the spring was 2.5, and the highest GPA in the spring was a 4. So we want to list our data from 2.5 to 4 in increments of 0.1, because that's the kind of data we're working with. So we'll start with 2.5. Remember, we're going to go lowest to highest, top to bottom, so that our histogram looks correct. Hit enter, 2.6, enter. Now, instead of doing 2.7, 2.8, all that manually, once you type in a couple of numbers, Excel is going to recognize the pattern. So I'm going to go ahead, click this first value, hold down the left mouse button, and just kind of drag down to approximately where you think 4.0 will end. Then make sure you're in the Home tab, click Fill, Series, make sure that the step value is 0.1 and it's linear, hit OK, and it counts up those for you. Now I went a little too far, so I'm just going to highlight these and hit delete. So now I have from 2.5 to 4, lowest to highest, top to bottom. Now to count how many students have each one of these GPAs, we're going to use the COUNTIF function. Now those of you who are familiar with Excel probably know about this awesome tool that's called pivot tables. But I'm not going to use the pivot tables, which makes this a lot simpler, but I'm not going to use it because it ignores any value that has a 0 frequency. And it's kind of a pain to insert those once you use the pivot table function. So I'm going to do this manually because, again, the whole point is to create a graph with this. And remember, you want to represent the full range of X values, even if there's none of those in your data set when you do your graph. So before I use the COUNTIF function to figure out how many times each one of these values appears in my data set, I'm going to go ahead and make this, so look for the double-sided arrow between the two columns. I'm going to stretch this out because when you start to insert functions here, it creates a bar that or like a little text box that takes up all this room, and then you're not able to click this value. You'll see why that's important here in a second. So for now, just kind of stretch this out and make some room. All right, so equals C-O-U-N-T. So start typing count, then look for count if, double click it, see where it says range, comma, space, criteria. So first we want to select the full range of values. So click that one, go to the bottom one, hold down shift and click that. Then I'm going to type comma, space. Now what do I want to count? So I want to look at all this data from B2 to B31. And I want to see how many times 2.5 appears. So that's my criteria. So you click the cell with 2.5, hit enter, and we have one student in the spring with a GPA of 2.5. So just do that for all of these. So count, double click count if, highlight the full range of scores, shift and click, comma, space. This is what we're counting. Make sure that you have the little plus sign before you click into the cell and then hit enter. Now I wish that the fill function worked for this, but for some reason it doesn't. So watch. So you highlight, go fill down, and this is not correct. I don't know why it does this. I don't know how to fix it. So I'm going to have you just do it all manually. But it's kind of frustrating because you have to just keep counting it. So equals count, double click, count if, full range of scores, comma, space. This is my criteria. Count if, double click, highlight the full range of scores, go down, comma, space. There's my criteria. All right. So I want you to go ahead and pause this video and work through all the little count ifs and then resume when you are finished. All right, so once you have finished all of your count ifs, and you can just see, if you click on it, the formula appears up here. Go ahead and highlight the last two values in your data set. Make sure the Home tab is selected. Click on the little arrow next to the little picture here of the borders, and do a bottom border. Now you have a nice pretty graph that's in APA style, or table rather. All right, let's go ahead. Highlight all of this, hit Control C to copy, go into your assignment, and then hit Control V under number 1 to paste. And there's your beautiful frequency distribution table in APA style. Now we're going to use that table to create a histogram. And we're creating a histogram because GPA is a ratio variable. So let's go ahead and get into Excel. Now, Excel's kind of finicky about creating graphs. You have to do some certain things in certain ways. So make sure that you have space above your graph, or above your table. And then highlight all of your data, including the space above. So you have to have an extra column or an extra row here. Go to Insert, click on the little picture of bar charts. Go ahead and select 2D column, the first one. I'm going to click and drag this over here. Now this is not a histogram. We have to edit it to become a histogram. So go over, make sure that your chart's selected. You're under the Design tab under Chart Tools. Go to Quick Layout and select Layout number 8, the one that looks like a histogram. Click on that. Now I'm going to go ahead and delete the word Spring GPA because it's inserting it automatically into my table, and I don't like that. Let's go ahead and label our axis. Our x-axis is GPA. Those are the values in our data set. Then our y-axis is the frequencies, so the number of students. Now we have a nice looking histogram. We can highlight it, copy, Control C, and then paste it right in, Control V, right into your assignment. I'm going to go ahead and put this on a separate page. If you hold down Control and hit Enter, it automatically inserts a page break. If you go to this little tab under the Home tab and click on that, you can see that I entered a page break here. It shows all of the edits. So we've got our table, we've got our graph. Now we need to figure out the mean and standard deviation for both the fall and the spring GPAs. Now I underlined sample here because just like when you do manual calculations for the standard deviation, you have to know if it's a sample or a population because the formula differs. Well, you have to make that distinction in Excel as well. So make sure you're using the sample standard deviation formula. So first we're going to find the values, and then I'll show you how to create an APA style table to represent those values. And I will be picky about APA style, so be careful. All right. So let's find our means and standard deviations. We already found our minimum and maximum. Now I want to find my mean, so I'm going to label where I'm going to find this stuff. And I'm just going to put SD for standard deviation. So let's start with fall GPA. So type equals. By typing equals, that tells Excel that you're getting ready to tell it a formula that you'd like to use. So equals, start typing in average. So AV, average, double click average. Then highlight all your data. So click the first one, hold down the shift key, left click the last one, and hit enter. Let's do the same thing for spring. Enter average, so equals AV, there's average, double click it. Click the bottom score, control or hold down shift, click the top score, hit enter. We've got our means. Now let's find our standard deviations. So equals STD, so find STDEV dot S. See, estimates the standard deviation based on a sample. So double click that and then highlight all of your data and hit enter. Then for spring, equals ST, standard deviation, sample, double click, highlight all of your data, hit enter. We've got our mean and our standard deviation. Hooray! All right, now we need to put this into an APA style table. So first I'll create the shell of the table in Word, and then we'll insert our values. And you know what? I'm going to have you round to the thousandths place. So let's go ahead and just round to the thousandths place right here in Excel. So highlight all of your data, right click, go to Format Cells, make sure number is selected, click number, and then tell it that you want to round 3 decimal places. So we're going to round to the thousandths place. Click OK, and it automatically does that for you. So when we go to steal these values, they'll be right there. And you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and copy these, and I'm going to put them here for now so that I don't have to go back and forth. And I'll delete them after I make my table that's all pretty in APA style. So to begin inserting a table, you click on the Insert tab, go to Table, and I think I'm going to need, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows and 4 columns. So you can do that this way, or you can just click Insert Table and say 5 columns, 4 rows. Now if I start to insert things into this table and realize that I need more or less rows or columns, I can insert more using the Layout tab and delete using the Delete tab. We'll see if I estimated it appropriately. All right, so right here, down here, the third row down in the first column, type variable. What variable are we looking at? We are looking at GPA. And what are we looking at for GPA? Well, we are looking at the mean and the standard deviation. So it's abbreviated SD in APA style. And we're looking at the mean and standard deviation for fall, and highlight, Control C to copy, Control V to paste, spring. And then I'm going to insert my values that I have up here. Remembering that this first one was for fall, and then the second one was for spring. So the mean for fall was 3.117. The standard deviation for fall was 0.592. Let's go ahead and put a 0 in front of it just so it's consistent. Then the mean for spring was 3.437, and the standard deviation for spring was 0.471. Now let's see. I want to also label my table up here for what it is, but let's go ahead and make this table fit the contents of what's inside of it, because there's all this extra room. So I'm going to highlight this, go to Auto Fit. So make sure that you have your table highlighted under Table Tools. Make sure that you're under the Layout tab. Click Auto Fit, Contents. And then it shrinks that table down so that it's just wide enough to fit everything that's within it. Now, I want fall to be above both the mean and standard deviation for fall. So highlight both of those cells, go to Merge Cells under the Layout tab, and then do the same for the two cells, spring and the one next to it, Merge Cells. Now I want to insert the label for my table. I like saying label and table, it's cute. All right, merge those cells, and you want to type table 1, then hit enter, and then in italics, you want to type descriptive, statistics for fall and spring GPA. So we're telling whoever's looking at this table what it is that this table describes. Now this is not an APA style yet. The first thing we need to do is we need to put our statistical notation in italics. So highlight it and hit Control I. You can also highlight it and go to the Home tab and hit the little italicized I button there. But I also want my fall, spring, mean, standard deviations, and numbers to be centered. So highlight those, go to the Layout tab, and then look for the nice little picture over here that says Align Center when you hover over it, and click on that. Still not done. We need to edit our borders here. So click on the little four-corner arrow thing, go to the Design tab, go down to Borders, and let's just start fresh. Let's select No Borders. So for APA style, we want to have a border above and below this piece right here. So click on Borders, bottom border, top border. Now I'm also not comfortable with the spacing that's going on here, so I'm going to go ahead and click this, go to the Home tab, and select No Spacing. There, that's starting to look better. But when I did that, it undid my centering, so I'm going to I'm just going to highlight this, go to Layout, and then hit that Center tab again. All right, now you also want to put a border below your GPA variable label and all the values. So Design tab, click on the arrow below Borders, bottom border. For APA style, you also want to put an underline. So highlight it and hit Control U to underline your different time periods here. Now you could also highlight and then hit this little button here to underline. And then just make sure that you have a space between the word Table 1 and the actual label, and you have a beautiful APA style summary of your mean and standard deviation for both fall and spring GPA. And you can go ahead and get rid of those values that you stole from Excel. Now, for number 4, you're on your own. I want you to explain this in plain English. So remember, when I say plain English, I don't want to hear the word mean or standard deviation. I want you to explain it if you were explaining it to somebody who knew nothing about statistics, because that tells me that you truly understand it. If you can explain something in plain English, then I'm confident that you know exactly what you're talking about. I also gave you some hints of the kind of language that you could use. Number 5, you're on your own. Link that to number 4. Number 6, let me show you how to create z-scores in Microsoft Excel without using the formulas. So what is the z-score for fall GPA and spring GPA for the first student in the sample? And if you look at the first student in the sample, you'll see that they have a GPA in the fall of 3.5 and a GPA in the spring of 3.7. I'm going to go ahead and just create a little column here that's called Z. And let's go ahead and figure out the z-scores here. So you can type in equals standardized. That's what we're looking for. Remember, z-scores are the standardized scores. So this returns a normalized value from a distribution characterized by a mean and standard deviation. That's a z-score. Double-click Standardize. We have to select the x value of interest. We have to select the mean, and we have to select the standard deviation as well. So I'm going to go ahead and find the z-score. And actually, you know what? Let me get out of here real quick. I want to stay organized. So I want to insert another column here. So I'll have Z for fall, and then insert another column. Go, make sure in the Home tab, go to Insert, Columns. Whoop. Control C, Control V. And let's call this Spring. Z for Spring. There. I feel a little better now. I'll be able to stay organized. All right, so equals, start typing standardized. Double click standardize. For fall, we're looking for that first person's x value. What is the z-score for that? So highlight that. Comma, space, the mean for fall, which is right there. Comma, space, the standard deviation for fall. Highlight that. Hit enter. And there you go. So we found the standardized value for the x at A2, which is 3.5, using the mean at A34, 3.117, and the standard deviation at A35, 0.592. And you know that there's a z-score there of 0.6476, or 0.648 if you're rounding to the thousands place. So that is the z-score for somebody with a GPA of 3.5 in the fall. That is where they fall relative to everybody else who we had their data on the fall GPA. All right, let's find it for that person's spring GPA. So equals ST, oh, there's standardized, double click. I'm looking for the X 3.7, right? That's the z-score that I want to use, or that's the X value that I want to use to calculate the z-score. Comma, space, the mean for spring, comma, space, the standard deviation for spring, hit enter. And there is my z-score for that first person in the spring. So now I'm going to go ahead and highlight these, right click, format cells, click number, and let's just go ahead and round to the thousands place. All right, so I've got 0.648. I'm going to go ahead and Control C, copy this, go into my assignment, paste. This little thing pops up. I usually just select keep text only so that it automatically adjusts the formatting. And then for spring, Control C, Control V, just keep the text. And you're done. And if you want to bold your answers for me, that makes my life a lot easier when I'm grading. So just highlight and hit Control B, or you can highlight and you can hit B here, or you can hit B under the Home tab. All right. So now you are on your own for the rest of this assignment. You need to use that frequency distribution table that we created up here to figure out the proportion of students in the sample with a GPA greater than 3.7 for spring semester, or in other words, the probability of randomly selecting a student from the sample with a GPA greater than 3.7. Then I want you to use the z-score that you found right here and the unit normal table to figure out what the unit normal table predicts that probability or proportion would be. And then I want you to explain why you get different answers for these two and which one is more accurate. So hint, hint, you're going to get different answers for these two. So I hope you found this video very useful, and I also hope that you learned some really neat tools that you can use in both Microsoft Word and Microsoft Excel.